technical difficulties. And we're back for episode 317. This is a podcast where we talk about news and politics and sex and religion. And with me, as always, is Shay the Subversive.
Hello.
Joe the Tech Guy.
Evening all.
And coming in from a satanic venue somewhere in Noosa is Brother Samael Demogorgon, otherwise known as Robin Bristow. Welcome aboard, Robin.
Thank you.
So, dear listener, we're going to rattle through the news and politics and sex and religion of the last 14 days, actually, and talk about various topics, things that are going on. But before we kick off, Robin's just going to join us because we've got a big event coming up on Saturday night where the Noosa Temple of Satan. Well, what are we doing, Robin? Tell everybody what's happening on Saturday night and why we're doing it and what's happening.
Last year we had our Black Mass at the Noosa Junction. I'm getting a double feedback here.
Well, then,
is there any way we can get rid of that?
Don't know, Robin.
No, I don't think there is.
I tell you what, Robin, you just talk. Take the headphones off and give your blurb, and then we'll cut you out after you've given your blurb. Do that.
Right. So last year we had our Black Mass at the Junction, and this year we reapplied to have the Black Mass, and the council said no, we couldn't have it there because of the threats that the Christians had made to the staff that worked at the J, and so effectively they banned us from using our spiritual venue, and so we're going to protest the fact that we're not allowed to have our Black Mass at our traditional venue and have it on the streets in Hastings Street this coming Saturday. And we're meeting there from 7:30 to start our protest at about 8 o'clock. And we're going to have a Black Mass on the streets of Hastings Street in Noosa. And we're going to include events like a pet blessing. And then we'll be marching down Hastings Street and turn around at the park and come back to where we started. So it should be a fun night for everyone.
Yep, and it's a legal event. We've got a permit, so there's no problem in that regard. So that's all good. I'll be there. You'll be there. A bunch of people. I believe there'll be a film crew as well. So have a look on the Noosa Temple of Satan Facebook page for any other details that you might want. But get dressed up and wear something outrageous, and it will be a fun event. And then we'll decamp to a pub nearby and discuss all sorts of things. So that's the plan. All right, Robin. Well, because of the technical difficulties, we'll say goodbye to you and let you go. And sorry for all that mucking around. We'll do a dry run next time. No worries.
And don't forget, we'll have transubstantiation happening.
Yes.
But we've got real body parts here. We don't have to rely on hosts that have been consecrated.
You're halfway there already, starting with the real body part. All right. Very good, Robin. We'll see you later and talk to you later.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, mate. Bye.
Bye.
That's Robin Bristow, Noosa Temple of Satan. This Saturday night, it will be fun. I've got my outfit already, so I don't want to spoil it and say what it is.
No,
we'll probably Facebook Live the event. So
great
with the handheld iPhone. So look out for that. Yep. If you're in the chat room, say hello and make some comments as we go. All right. So that was Robin. Okay, just it wasn't even on the running sheet, but there was the announcement of the government's plan for net zero 2050. And this was then just another classic Morrison play of just announcing something without any detail and just saying, we're working hard, we've created this plan, we're moving forward, and all of the weasel words and just nonsense.
Technology, not taxes.
That's right. And the Australian way. We're going to do it the Australian way. I am so sick of this guy.
Yes.
I just want to vomit when I hear him talk.
Yeah.
And surely, Australia, you've worked it out by now. Surely you can see through this con artist. if you, I was at a dinner party the other night and people were saying, "Oh, what do you reckon about Morrison? We're not so sure about him now." And I'm going, "You're not so sure? Like, can you not see what this guy is?" So,
Still on the fence, you mean? I
yes,
potentially might vote for him.
yes, yeah. They're saying, "Oh, starting to have second thoughts about him." And I was going, "You're kidding me." And so, and a news poll came out today, which party do you still trust with the economy? And of course,
I said the Liberal Party.
yeah, way ahead. It's actually quite depressing.
It is depressing.
I'm beyond
It
the
is really
outrage. And I'd
depressing.
really like, there's so much evidence in front of you now. If you really haven't picked up what a prick this guy is,
Mm.
and not even a smart prick, just if you haven't worked it out by now, what can we do? You're clearly just
That's
not
right.
paying any attention.
That's right.
Sort of depressing.
It is.
So it's like one of those things where you just have to tune out after a while and go, I don't really want to go into the weeds and the woods on this because I'll just get depressed the more I read about it. Yeah. There was one good line from Chris Bowen who said, "I've seen more detail in a fortune cookie."
Yes,
That was a great line. Sometimes a little comedic line sums up the whole thing. Why go
Totally.
through and talk for 10 minutes when you can just sum it up with that? Yeah. So anyway, of course, it's all going to, it's a bunch of weasel words relying on technology. And they said, well, what technology is that? And it's, well, technology will be invented. Technology is always being invented. In fact, if you were to bet against technology, you would be foolish. So the course of human history is that technologies will arise and we're just relying on that
Yes.
for a certain percentage.
The Juice Media podcast has a big section on the technologies they're looking at and the fudges and it's another way to prop up the fossil fuel industry is the long and the short of it.
Yes.
By clean carbon.
Yes.
And blue hydrogen.
Yes. Carbon storage and just dodgy figures. You just cannot trust a single thing these guys say. So
and for this, we got to promote Keith Pitt.
Yes.
Someone gets a promotion for this heap of shit.
And we're being extorted by the National Party. We've just got a handful of votes. And probably a lot of their voters want something done on this regard. It's such a blight on our democracy. This is not a democracy.
No.
When we're going to have Barnaby Joyce in charge of the country.
That's right.
And we've been held to ransom by these guys.
Yes.
The Matt Canavans of the world. This is not a democracy.
No, it's not.
It's something less than that. It's not a totalitarian state yet, but
it's an oligarchy.
But we're just kidding ourselves with the level of democracy going on in this country and a lot of Western countries.
That's right.
Yeah. So, So, what more is there to say except be depressed but be angry as well, and hope something comes along. There was a question time with Milton Dick asked the Prime Minister Scott Morrison a question, and I'll just play what happened there. Hopefully it comes through.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. When the Prime Minister arrives in Glasgow in a fortnight's time, will he tell the meeting electric vehicles will end the weekend, batteries to store renewable energy are as useful as the big banana and the big prawn, and renewable energy targets are nuts?
The Prime Minister has Mr. Speaker, I don't accept the caricature that the member has put forward. Mr. Speaker, it's just simply not the
Members
case.
on my left.
It's a complete misrepresentation.
Quoting his own words to him as a complete misrepresentation. It was it was all in context. It wasn't stitching him up. That was how he felt about climate change.
That's
and look,
right.
it's fair
he
enough.
was the coal fondler in chief, wasn't he?
Yes. I mean, and it's fair enough to change your mind on something. Like if you've honestly changed your mind, fair enough. If he came out and said, yeah, I said all those things, but you know what? I've changed my mind. But to just say, oh, I don't accept the premise. You're reading it the wrong way. I've never really been against it. That's the part. It's okay to change your mind if you have. But it's just embarrassing to think of some of the leaders who'll be at Glasgow, and
know.
we've got that character turning up. So
And that might be the thing to say, like maybe climate change isn't important to you, maybe women's issues isn't important to you, but I guarantee you if there's anything that's important to you, Scott Morrison is going to handle it the exact same way he's handled everything else.
right,
Make an announcement,
yes,
cover it up, not read the report, not do his due diligence,
Mm.
and then
Just spin
take
it.
somebody else's crappy money.
Spin it to his own political
So-
advantage and create a wedge if he can.
Yes.
And just with an eye to the election and winning power
That's
again
it.
is the whole purpose for being there.
Yes.
Except the one item where he will actually probably try and get something done.
Religious freedom bill.
Exactly.
Yes.
The one goddamn thing
Yes.
that he does care about and will actually force some legislative change.
Jesus put him
Yes.
there just for that.
He did. That, of all the things.
Mm,
Yeah. So that's what we've got to look forward to. Oh dear.
mm.
So yeah. Just a few things from Twitter. Amy Ramicus, she's from The Guardian, I think. She said, Morrison went on to say the government won't sign up to net zero without a fully costed plan. I mean, that's from a couple of days ago. And he's now signing up without any costed plan, which left me wondering how much the submarines he signed up for are going to cost, which is true. I mean, he just uses words when he wants to. Oh, I won't sign up without a fully costed plan. Well, I just have, but who cares? And I do it all the time with submarines, but who cares?
Yeah.
Truth, fact, logical. Just please be consistent. If you're going to rely on a certain premise, apply it across different other categories where it's appropriate. No, just all out the window. Do whatever you like.
Yeah.
So, Sky News reported National Party ministers have threatened to quit cabinet if Prime Minister Scott Morrison fails to meet their demands and his net zero emissions target. And Adam Vance said, you say that like it's a bad thing. So that's true. If some of them would quit, that mightn't have been a bad thing. And yeah, that's that. So that's climate change. It'll be interesting to see what happens over the next few weeks. It'll just be more weasel words. I noticed actually, I follow the Scott Morrison Facebook page. Do you follow that?
No. Basically.
Not masochistic enough?
I would just grind my teeth to dust and I need them.
It's often full of stuff. If an Australian's won a gold medal or if an Australian's done something, it's, oh, congratulations, or if somebody's died, oh, so sad to see. And he just comments, or his staffers do, on his behalf. But I get the feeling it's him. He's so jingoistic with a lot of stuff and, you know, all of his announcements. And a lot of the time, it's just flooded with stuff. Good on you, ScoMo. You're the best prime minister we've ever had. Keep up the good work. It's just littered throughout it in the comments. But on the climate change one with his announcement, people have poured onto him. Like,
Right.
the Facebook comments, great, but it's by people saying, how dare you sign up to 2050 net zero? This is the wrong thing to do. How dare you cave in to the left?
Did you?
Oh, caving to the left.
Yes, it's all along that sort of.
Oh, some of this.
How dare you give in to the science? But did you hear about the sock puppet accounts? So sock puppets are fake accounts on social media,
right,
that people use to comment and it not come back to them.
Right.
And there were a number of Liberal MPs that were caught using sock puppets to comment on their Facebook feeds.
Right. Okay. And also on their Wikipedia pages. I saw that somewhere.
Oh, yeah. The IP address was traced back to Parliament House.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So he actually got heat from people, but from his crowd saying, what the hell are you doing? You've turned into a pinko commie. You've caved into the left, and the only people making sense in this world are Alan Jones and Andrew Bowles. Comments like that.
And Matt Canavan.
Yeah.
So you mean Rupert Murdoch releases one bout of climate change positive newspapers, and after years of bombarding us the other way, it didn't make a difference?
No. His key columnists have all maintained the line.
Right.
But what they have done in the Murdoch press is they're pushing hard on nuclear. They're really pushing for some sort of nuclear solution to our energy needs in the future. So lots of stuff about nuclear. They love the idea. despite everything we said the other week with former New South Wales Premier Carr,
Bob Carr?
Bob Carr,
Yeah.
yes, saying essentially nobody in business is interested in the nuclear
right.
option. It's too expensive.
Yes.
And I was talking to somebody involved in the energy industry who shall remain nameless,
Yes.
and he was saying that there's real issues with nobody wants to even produce solar at the moment because they just can't get their money. When they're trying to sell the electricity, they can't make a dollar because it's just a surplus of electricity being produced in the system at different times now during the day, and they're sitting on excess electricity. And some of the solar ones are actually selling it at a loss up to 30 cents a megawatt because there's a government subsidy of 30 cents. So they're actually willing to sell it at a loss because they didn't pick up the subsidy. So that's interesting. There's a lot of there's issues with.
So
there's also talk about households being taxed in the future, being charged for exporting electricity at high peak,
correct,
high generation.
We don't
times,
want your electricity, and we're going to penalise you for putting it in the grid,
which is to encourage you to buy batteries and store it.
But also, any new system now, I believe in certain states, when it's installed, it has to have a switch that they can operate at a central location to turn it off, so it doesn't come into the grid.
Okay,
so that's
I've not heard that one.
Yeah, that's what I heard with new systems, that they can actually, you can't enter the system now unless you've got a cut-off switch that they can turn on and off if they need to turn you off. Yeah.
Right.
So, so interesting times in the energy market. And the other thing about...
So who loses if we have a surplus of electricity?
The suppliers of electricity.
Right. Okay, right. Yeah. Say that like it's a bad thing.
Yeah. The other thing about it is that the problem with the coal plants is they can't switch on and off easily. They can't ramp up and ramp down. Like, they just have to keep going. And that's one of the inherent flaws with them, or problems, is that
no, it's a good thing.
They're not flexible.
It's base load.
Yeah, base load. But that's the same problem with nuclear. Nuclear can't be turned off and on as well. So that's part of the problem with nuclear is they'll have this base load that they then, what do we do with it? We can't switch it off easily. So
I was at a coal-fired power station a couple of years ago, and they were saying historically, middle of the day, air conditioners running, it was their busy time. They couldn't afford any downtime. Absolutely had to be up in the middle of the day.
Yep.
They're now saying it's their maintenance period.
Right. Yep. Yeah.
There's no call for them. And this particular one was air cooled as opposed to water cooled. And actually their peak efficiency is at night. So it's a good thing that in the middle of the day, solar, because they're less efficient in the middle of the day, they produce less electricity.
Yes.
So it's good for them to shut down, and that will not shut down, but reduce their running to just idle. And then at night ramp up when the solar comes out, because they're more efficient at that time.
Right. And when the wind doesn't blow at night time as well.
Well, yeah, exactly.
According to some politician who said that as well.
Yeah. I thought that was a Batuta advocate thing. No, that's real.
That's right. You've got to look at things carefully. Satire and reality.
It is depressing.
It's Poe's law, isn't it?
Poe's law, is it?
Yeah.
What's Poe's law?
Poe's law says that there is no way to caricature a creationist that is so ridiculous that it couldn't have been said by a creationist.
That's true. Okay. So, okay. Shane, realise that you shouldn't underestimate the underclass.
No, you shouldn't. It's true.
According to Prue Goward, they are damaged, lacking in trust and discipline, and highly self-interested. But the poor are still a force that Australia needs to properly harness. So she was some former sort of Equality Commission commissioner.
I know, it's a worry, isn't it?
And a former LNP politician of some sort. So what do you think of that article?
I said, I was going to come in here raging, but I've had a few moments to calm down. But certainly, like, from our from my personal experience, having been, you know, in a secure job for a lot of years, always thought I'd have a job, basically got my mortgage on the back of being someone who worked for Qantas, who at the bank said I would always have a job, to basically overnight, just like completely not having an income, scrambling for any work I could, quickly worked at a furniture shop. That's part-time wages. That's $15 an hour with the hope of commission if you sell a couple of lounges. I worked my bloody ass off. And all the while, and for the past 2 years, I've basically eaten tuna and rice, had to watch all of my bus tickets, I've had to be I am such a resourceful, capable person now on the back of all of this. So in some ways she's right. But it has been so hard every time JobKeeper comes up to have people say things like, oh, but taxpayers paying for you. And, you know, like it's almost like Australia's become like so mean-spirited and that the Liberals act like taxpayer money is their money. And it's almost like Australia feels the same. I was just like so furious. It's true. It's hard to be poor, but also I think you can keep underestimating us and I think you can keep exploiting us because I actually still can't really see. It's a long road back for me to be financially stable again. And I'm not speaking for myself because there's heaps of flight attendants who we got stood down for a long period of time. Then Qantas was like, yep, you're all going back to work. And then they were like, actually, no, you're not.
Right.
So we were in secondary employment. We gave up our secondary employment to come back because Qantas was like, no, you work for us. You come back now. Then we all had to be stood down and find another secondary employment in the meantime.
Right. Yeah.
Like we are not sitting on our asses and people act like we are. And then they put shit like this in the newspaper just to reiterate it.
Yes.
So the poor people are very wide and varied, honey, Prue, now.
Well,
so you're talking to all of us, a lot more of the people than you think you are.
Oh, she's an expert on poor people. So, the sort of whole tone of it was was really sort of looking down a nose at the underclass was the tone of the article. But the point of the article was that a lot of people have missed.
Including me.
Right. Well, the point was, she says the good thing about the underclass is they can spot a fake at 50 paces.
No, because they keep voting for ScoMo.
And she said they were a significant part of the anti-vax protests. They had correctly identified the freedoms the rest of us had only been too happy to give up. And never have we needed them more to challenge modern meekism. The child who cried, "Look at the king" in the Emperor's New Clothes was surely a member of the underclass. So it had the tone of a sneering looking down at the downtrodden underclass, but she was actually saying the one thing in their favour is they're against vaccination and they can smell a rat in this whole system. So it was actually a dog
the one
whistle.
thing they've got going for them is they think they know more than scientists who've spent literally their entire career studying a single field.
Yeah. So it was actually also a dog whistle to the anti-vaxxers and whatnot in the community, saying that.
Well, I assert that the people out there fighting in Melbourne and riding have never done a hardship in their lives.
Right.
They're small business owners who are living large and making it rain and snorting cocaine.
I don't know.
And now suddenly they get locked up. So, and yeah, you're right. That's pretty much.
I don't know what they are. Certainly, they seem like a fair number of construction workers in there, and construction workers can be doing all right. Thank you very much. So, who knows? Now, so that was Prue Goward, and was there anything else I want to say about her at the time? No, that'll do on Prue Goward. Okay. Oh, do you want to talk about, while we're on the topic then of the poor? Did you want to talk about the ex-Alitalia flight attendants?
Yeah. Although I was actually kind of inspired by this story, so I was kind of taking a different swing on it. So to give the listeners some background, what's the name of it? Air Alitalia.
Yes.
Yes. Are were in financial distress, like a number of other airlines, and so they were bought out by ITA Airlines. Took some of their planes, 3,000 of their workers, and left the other 7,000 without a job, and renewed the contracts of the 3,000 to considerably less wages.
Yep.
Which is happening aviation wide.
Yep. And basically take it or leave it.
Yes.
Because the old company's gone and this is a new deal and we can just put you
We
on.
can do what we like with you.
Yes.
Yep.
Because strangely,
Qantas is playing the same game, by the way.
Conditions and workers' rights, funnily enough, decrease over time rather than increase.
Yeah, that's right.
So when you're a fresh employee, you get a worse deal.
That's right.
As opposed to property prices and things that work in the other direction over time increase. So,
yes.
So yes. So they weren't happy.
That's right. So how many flight attendants did we have? So we had 100, was it? No, probably not that many.
Dozens.
It doesn't say.
Dozens.
Dozens of flight attendants got together and as a silent protest wore their uniforms and then started stripping off their uniform. And then at the end did a loud yell or something.
Right.
And I don't know. I was inspired by that because I don't know if this happens to men, but often women will be photographed naked all the time and it will be positioned for us. They'll say, oh, I got naked and posed naked for you guys because it's so empowering to other women.
Right.
And it's actually not empowering to women to see other naked women.
Yes.
And I just thought that was a beautiful action protest of a perfect balance between the female form, which is a work of art, and the fact that our bodies are also vehicles and a possible communication thing. So that's what I took from that angle. I took that angle from this.
Have you got the picture up, by the way?
I did have.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So
I wasn't really that concerned with poor people. I just thought that was cool, really cool for a whole range of ways. The action, the beauty of the protest, the artwork.
Well, this is the thing. You need publicity, and
True.
if you're just going to fire off a press release and complain, well, who's
or even a protest march?
Yeah. Yes, indeed. Who's going to listen?
Yeah.
So you need some outrageous element in order to gather attention. So,
but I just still thought like they could have got, properly naked or something like that, and they would have got the same press. But I don't know. There was a real beautiful, almost poetry to it. It was art.
There you go.
So that's what I liked about it.
Well, we're still talking about Lady Godiva. How
Who?
many years?
Yeah, Lady Godiva. Why did
Fill
she?
me in.
Why did she?
What did she do?
You never heard of Lady Godiva?
She rode naked through the middle of town.
Yeah. Why
As
did
a
600 years ago.
Yeah. Why did she do that?
as a protest, but I can't remember why.
Right.
It was a protest, and it got her attention. And
was it supposed to be that her hair covered everything or something, or the important parts, or but I don't know why Lady Godiva did that, but we'll find out before the end of the evening. And that was
Anglo-Saxon noblewoman somewhere between 1066 and 1086.
And why did she do it? It's not a famous story.
Oppressive taxation that her husband imposed on his tenants. So to complain against her husband, as his chattel, she rode naked through the middle of town.
There we go. There we go. Learn something every day.
Indeed.
Yeah. So
James is like, likely never happened.
Yeah.
Almost certainly, but it's a good story.
You said in your note to me, I'd like to discuss this at the next podcast. I'll talk a bit about third wave feminism. Is this third wave feminism or?
I meant to write an article, but leave it.
Okay, we'll let that go. All right.
Because this is going to kind of like mix it all in with how third wave feminism is kind of like characterized as a confusing topic.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a whole range of things.
Yeah. I looked at a few things. It looks like we're up to fourth wave feminism. And I didn't even know there was third wave. Yeah, apparently. So.
Ooh, what's fourth wave feminism about?
I don't know.
I'll have to do some research.
It was just third wave on steroids. So what was...
Did you write this or did I write this?
No, this came from Wikipedia. So,
I was having a read of this myself.
Yeah, somebody who invented the third wave said, "So I write this as a plea to all women, especially women of my generation. Let Thomas's confirmation," that was a Supreme Court judge confirmation, Serve to remind you, as it did me, that the fight is far from over. Let this dismissal of a woman's experience move you to anger. Turn that outrage into political power. Do not vote for them unless they work for us. Do not have sex with them. Do not break bread with them. Do not nurture them if they don't prioritise our freedom to control our bodies and our lives. I am not a post-feminism feminist. I am the third wave. Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's go back.
Any thoughts?
Protest whatever you want to, like withdrawal of services, labour, whatever you got to do to make change, if that's the case.
You think it'll work?
Which part?
Well, do you think they'll get their jobs back?
No.
Yeah.
No, but it'll make people think about it and make people think, that could be me, and that's happening all around the place, and maybe we should vote for a party who's going to help people in that situation. So, but it won't actually get them their job back, I don't think.
Or even better, to onionize.
Onionize? What's that?
Join an onion.
Join an onion?
Yes, join a union.
A union?
Yes.
Right.
There's a very good correlation between working conditions and membership of a union.
Yes. Well,
in fact, the T-Dubs just won a case to reinstate thousands of Qantas workers, which Qantas is still fighting for, but so far they've lost. So it's a key difference in outcome there.
And if they're saving money on their flight attendants, are they going to pass those on in ticket costs?
It's too tough, the market. No, may be happening. Okay, back to the top. Where was I with the next topic? Just in New South Wales, they're really in the grip of the Catholics down there. So Crikey's been doing a lot on a series of articles on how the religious groups have taken over New South Wales Libs and federally as well. They've been doing a lot, and the articles have been not behind a paywall as well. I think you've been able to access those for free, and most of them on the Crikey website.
I saw the video, but I haven't actually looked at.
So a lot of their sort of God series they've been doing lately is very good. So have a look on Crikey and have a look at that. But they're making the point here. So with the voluntary assisted dying legislation, that's going to go to the upper house for an inquiry now. So that'll put that off for sort of a time delay sort of thing. And they really, in this article, paint an interesting picture that you've got Perrottet now, who's the premier. You've got the leader in the upper house is a guy called Tude Hope. I think it's Tudehope, Tude Hope. He's another hardline Catholic. And the article just shows the relationship between the two families where Perrottet hired Tude Hope's daughter, Tude Hope hired Perrottet's brother. They're all working in amongst their different offices. They're all part of this Catholic group that was in with Archbishop Anthony Fisher, who was in with George Pell. And these are the people making the decision on whether the cemetery should be managed by an independent group or whether the Catholics should maintain control of the bits that they want to maintain control of. And there's clearly a conflict of interest there. And there was another article by Crikey about the Baird family. Remember Bruce Baird?
Remember the name.
Mike Baird.
My bad.
His father, Bruce, the actual electorate that Scott Morrison took over was previously a Baird electorate, and just how the family is interwoven with all sorts of people, particularly out of America, and it's just the interweaving of all sorts of people in power based on religion. And it's too depressing for me to read again, but Crikey have done a really good job and all that sort of stuff. So meanwhile, Christina Keneally says that no one is seriously trying to turn Australia into a theocracy. And she got quite annoyed at the people who have basically looked at Perrottet and gone, not another bloody Catholic. And this guy's too red hot. He's too red hot. We don't want him. And she's turned around and said, well, we can't just say you can't have somebody because they're religious. Well, the point is people aren't saying we can't have him, but they're saying we don't want him. And
Yes, which you
you-
actually can say.
exactly.
Yeah.
So it's democratic to be able to say we don't want him because of his views, which we know what they are because he subscribes
And
to this.
Wasn't
view.
she?
She was a Catholic as well.
I know that,
Mm.
but wasn't she a secularist?
She was more secular, I think, than most, but she was still against the
Stem cells.
some of the abortion law stuff. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, she says it's crazy to say that we're trying to turn anyone's trying to turn Australia into a theocracy. At the end of the day, it already is in many respects, and they're just hanging on to it. So, they really straw man the argument a lot of the time. So people have legitimately been saying this is unrepresentative of Australia. This guy has got views that the majority of Australians don't agree with, yet he is in power, and
nobody voted for him.
Nobody voted for him. And as sure as heck looks like he's going to stop legislation that most of us want because of his religious views. And she will turn it around from saying, sometimes I wonder if those who look down on people of faith and try to stop them from entering political debate simply lack confidence in their own positions. Well, nobody's stopping him from entering political debate. People are wanting to debate with him and the process. So the other thing is, yeah. So anyway, she stood up for Dominic Perrottet and said, back off. And
again, it's not stopping them entering the debate. It's giving them more power than realistically the majority of society. 90% of us don't believe in the same things that he does. If he starts bringing in laws based on his beliefs, then he's ruling for the 10%.
Yes.
And not for all of us, let alone the majority of us.
Yeah. I mean, we're having all this corruption stuff about Christian Porter. Who paid the money? Is there a corporate interest there that he's going to then be held on account to? We've had Gladys Berejiklian and her boyfriend and a conflict of interest. And these people are under a conflict of interest when they are so heavily involved with the church, and a church is a major player in our politics, in our society. So he may not be a shareholder in the Catholic Church, but they don't have shareholdings. It's as good as you get as being a shareholder. So it's
and this
relevant.
is the best we can expect from the ex-Labor Premier of New South Wales, who is what have you got here? Deputy Leader of the Opposition in the Senate. Who's decided it's not good enough for her to be third on the ticket of the Senate and is now going to run for a House of Representatives seat, which was just this hugely factional dispute. This is where her attention is right now.
Yeah.
On defending
the
opposition.
Yes. Yep. Yeah.
Not her best work.
Yeah. Even Michael Westmedia did a great expose on the JobKeeper rorts, basically, which saw $40 billion going to corporations that made money or paid bonuses to their executives. And essentially it showed how during the crisis, in the heady days of the crisis, the government was meeting with corporate power groups who were saying, got to keep it going. Don't put any sort of constraints on this. And Treasury had sort of observed that there's problems here where we're giving money to people who don't need it. And anyway, the government has decided that it won't be clawing back any of that money. Like it could pass some legislation of some sort to say, well, you guys got money you didn't need, we want it back. $40 billion gone to some of the wealthiest companies and biggest in Australia, many of them foreign owned.
Hardly normal.
And what's the Labor Party response?
Oh, well, they're not going to stand up to the business lobby, are they?
Rolled over.
Qantas needs that 28 new aircraft.
Rolled
they're planning.
rolled over and said, "Yeah, we don't think they should be clawing back that 40 billion either. Let it go. Let it go. Let it go." There we go. It's a depressing episode so far.
Whereas if you owe Centrelink money,
Yes,
they'll hound you till you death.
Absolutely.
the last $50 out of you on a robo. Exactly.
Yes. Made to feel like I was just,
Yeah.
my cap in my hand, begging Australia to keep me alive.
Yeah. In the chat room, Bronwyn says, have a look at Andrew Lee, Labor MP for Canberra. He's adopted it as a special issue. So have a look at him, and definitely have a look at Michael West Media. So, so good on you in the chat room. Keep chatting away there. Yeah. So the next article.
Maybe companies should be paying a CEO tax based on the amount they pay their CEOs.
Yes,
Hooray!
Yes. Yeah. So
Certainly Qantas crew would love that.
I reckon there should be a different tax rate depending on how many employees you've got.
Or maybe just the taxation in the difference between the median wage.
Yes, the multiple between the CEO wage and the median wage of the employees or something. Yep. Formulas like that. And also, I reckon just number of employees, because I can remember we did something on Instagram in Australia or somebody like that. And they had like 4 employees, something crazy, because everyone was just outsourced on contracts. And so...
so taxing on outsourced rather than a small business.
Well, something to encourage people.
So maybe turnover per employee.
Yeah, something to sort of reward companies who actually do employ a lot of people, as opposed to companies who have very few employees.
Yep.
Because that's what we want our companies to be doing, is employing people. So,
but they're just going to say that they're very efficient.
Yes, and we're going to say, well,
that's fine.
That's fine, but we're going to reward people who employ people. So if you don't get that reward, so that might affect your efficiency. So, anyway, okay, so that was the multinationals. That was Labor rolling over. Oh, we had Christian Porter's Blind Trust. So we had a situation.
Blind Trust or brown paper bag?
Yeah. So we had a situation where there was a vote on the floor of Parliament about putting this to, I think, some privileges committee. And the Speaker of the House, a Liberal, said there's enough of a prima facie case here that it should go to this privileges committee to be investigated. Not saying he's guilty, but it should go there. Speaker of the House.
Mm-hmm.
And they goddamn called a division, got everybody in and voted it down and said no.
Apparently first time in history. Australian parliamentary history.
So essentially saying it's fair enough and for a politician just to get $1 million anonymous donation, supposedly anonymous, without having to declare it.
Mm-hmm.
And the next day in the Courier Mail, guess how many words were written about that particular event?
0.
Not a single word in the Courier Mail about it at all. And the Australian on page 2 had one column that would possibly have been 200 words maximum. Porter funding probe blocked. Like a massive blow to our democracy. And just no mention of it. Gone.
Never you mind.
Yeah, exactly. Who cares?
No. I'm just thinking, Sir Joe.
Yeah.
Shades of.
Yes. Yeah. This Perrottet reminds me of Joe era.
Really?
And I think the pictures of him, does he wear Brill cream? Is Perrottet got, he looks quite slick with his hair. It's that whole 50s, 60s sort of Brill creamed hair type dude. That's what I keep seeing in him. Some spooky reminiscences of my father in him or something. I don't know. But that's part of what harks back to that era. So
maybe that's what he aspires to.
Yeah. Yes. Well, that's right. And a big family, because there should be no social welfare, because that That means people don't have a big family to look after them. They're relying on the state.
Yeah.
So if we were to speculate about whose $1 million it was, what would be our worst case scenario? Like, why is it so important that they protect whom donated it?
I reckon it's going to be some dodgy member of the underworld who's been smuggling in large quantities of drugs.
I was going to say taxpayer.
I think it's just going to be
Somehow
some
Australians' money.
famous miner of some sort, I would have thought.
Probably, but if we're saying worst case,
Yeah, that's true.
Right.
That's true. We are just speculating.
Right. The worst case would be a drug smuggler, you're saying?
oh, I'm just.
Right.
Or Cardinal Pell, he wants redemption.
Yes.
Catholic Church.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Twiggy
Yeah.
Forest.
Yeah.
Bronwyn reckons it's Twiggy Forest.
Yeah, there's all sorts of there's all sorts of rumors going around. So, God damn it, Bronwyn, am I now potentially responsible for your potentially defamatory comment?
No, it's a rumor.
Bronwyn?
It's a rumor.
It's a rumor.
She's not actually saying it's Twiggy Forest. There are rumors about all sorts of mining magnates.
Exactly.
And thanks, Bronwyn. That's the thing. Like, there you go. Could potentially be liable for a defamatory comment there. Okay. Right. We've done the flight attendants. We've done that one. Roman did send the Ernie Awards through.
Yes.
Is there some crackling come through the
There
microphone?
was.
Yeah. What is that? What's that crackling? I can hear some crackling coming through.
It's coming from the tablet.
Do you want to just turn the tablet off then? There we go. Crackling's gone. So there's Ernie Awards. I'm not sure where this came from, but basically for the best sexist comments of the previous year. And the gold Ernie went to Erica Betts when asked by Tasmanian Speaker Sue Hickey if Christian Porter was the unidentified minister who was accused of rape. He allegedly replied, yes, but not to worry. The woman is dead and the law will protect him. As for that Higgins girl, anybody so disgustingly drunk who would sleep with anybody could have slept with one of our spies, put the security of the nation at risk. We thought there. An industrial silver Ernie went to General Angus Campbell, Chief of Defence, who told incoming female ADFA candidates they should avoid making themselves prey to sexual predators by being aware of the, quote, 4 A's: alcohol, out after midnight, alone and attractive. Good advice there from General Angus Campbell. Is he a Governor General or something yet? They normally get the gig, these
They
guys.
normally do, but I don't think so.
I've lost track of my Governors General. Jeremy Cordeau, South Australian radio host on Brittany Higgins, said, I just asked myself why the Prime Minister doesn't call it out for what it is, a silly little girl who got drunk. Here's one from Ricky Stewart, coach of the Canberra Raiders. He said, if I can't have tough conversations with my better players, I might as well coach netball. Did you get tough conversation? Tell me what's it like at a halftime chat on a netball court. Does it get direct?
It's intense.
Right.
Yeah. Who needs to pick up the slack? Who needs to do this? Who needs to read the play?
Tough conversations are made. Shay, pull your socks up. You're not
Talk
covering this person well enough.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. We never had to tiptoe around the fragile male ego. No.
Right.
Bang.
There we go. And then, of course,
That was a joke, by the way.
Right.
Yeah.
Then we had Morrison. Jenny and I spoke last night. She said to me, you have to think about this as a father first. What would you want if it were our girls? Jenny has a way of clarifying things.
General Campbell is still a general and the head of the army.
There you go. Protecting our young female staff.
One advice at a time.
Okay, that's enough of the Ernies.
Ooh.
Colin Powell. Did you ever hear of Colin Powell before his death this week? Yeah. So,
well, naming anyone after a body part.
Right. Yes. strange guy. I mean, his first name's Colin, but he insisted that he
was
pronounced
Colin.
Colin. Yeah, Colin Powell. Military guy from the USA. It's amazing how much press it got.
He was
about him.
conservative, wasn't he?
He was, but in the end, he was anti-Trump, though. He did go against
good.
Trump. So a never Trump Republican, I think. But it's got a lot of press about what a great guy he was in Australia and such an honourable man and all the rest of it. And even on things like the ABC News, you'll see Colin Powell, American legendary general, dies amid acclaim of what a great guy he was, essentially. Like, without going into the detail, but actually, you know what? Maybe he wasn't so great because he was the one who painted the picture at the UN to say that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. He should have known it was bullshit. He was sprouting, and he should have said no, and he didn't. He's got form on that regard because he was in Vietnam with the My Lai massacre.
My Lai.
And he'd received a letter from infantryman saying there's an issue here, and he went, oh, no, there isn't. And of course there was. And what else? He was a third thing. He was involved in torture. He was in meetings where they were how much can we torture people and get away with it? And even with the gays in the military, he sort of promoted and instituted the Don't Ask, Don't Tell. So,
although that was under Clinton, wasn't it?
Could have started under that, but he was happy to keep it going. So he probably he's probably a lovely guy to have for a dinner party and to talk about things.
I'm sure.
And probably, would have taken your bins out if he was your next door neighbour and you were away on holidays and stuff. But on the really crucial things, that was his job.
Sounds like Roger Rogerson.
Yeah. So I'm quite amazed at how much coverage it got. Even on the weirdest of places. Like there's this guy, John Dixon, who is this sort of pastor type guy. And he had a thing about Colin Powell and what a great man he was, and there were all these comments about it. And, a lot of talk about him. So...
and around that he would take the bins out and was a real community guy, or was it more about
saying what a
the
great
government
guy he was
decisions?
and what a great American and what's so sad to see him go sort of thing without any of the acknowledgement of the crappy things he did that caused the death of hundreds of thousands of people. Okay. There we go. Tom the Warehouse Guy was also astounded by the Angus Campbell quote. Okay. What else have I got here? Nuclear. I've got some notes on. Essentially, I mentioned before, News Corp is going hard on nuclear. COVID.
Doesn't exist.
No. Well, that guy down the Gold Coast, who's got COVID,
who hadn't used his QR code check-in
since September
in months.
Yep.
And was on oxygen and or assisted breathing so that they couldn't actually ask him where he'd been and who he'd exposed.
Yeah, and he was trying to fight his way and abscond from the hospital.
Yeah, that was
claiming
yesterday or
that COVID was a hoax. What can you do?
You can't do anything.
No.
Euthanasia?
Yeah. Dire Straits, did you read my comment on nuclear? I did, Dire Straits. You said something about smaller suburban nuclear modular type stuff, I think. And Dire Straits, did you listen to my comments about nuclear a week or two ago, which said how expensive nuclear is, how hard it is to get up and running, and how nobody's doing it, how it's NIMBYs.
Not in my backyard.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
if they honestly think they're going to be deploying a little nuclear reactor in every suburb, you got to be joking.
Yeah. I mean, if the Scandinavians can't build one on time and on budget, how are we going to do it? Honestly. So, yes, I did, Dire Straits, but I just didn't want to argue with you And now I have. There we go. COVID. Here we go. There's a tweet by this guy, Jeff, who says, holy fucking shit, vaccine mandates are causing teachers who don't believe in science to quit, nurses who don't believe in medicine to quit, and cops who don't believe in public safety to quit. I'm failing to see the downside to this.
Well, exactly.
It's a sorting out process, isn't it? Now, you had previously poo-pooed nurses as being potentially a group of large, with an above average level of COVID.
Above average for medical profession.
Yes, of sort of vaccine skepticism and whatnot.
Yeah, a worrying amount.
Yes. And before we started, you mentioned you saw some statistic that
Yes. Yes.
Which was?
Which was that the Queensland Nurses Union has lost 4,000 members over mandating vaccines.
Yeah, that's a
and
lot.
that they are
And-
going across to NPAC, who are going to supposedly fight the fight for them.
And this is mandating that people who are working with a at-risk population should be vaccinated. Not general members of the public. This is people who are working with sick patients who possibly have suppressed immune systems.
Yes.
Right.
And your mother wasn't happy with his comment, was she?
She wasn't.
Oh.
She thought it was, I think she even said that she thought it was ironic that we spent the first part of the session talking about defamatory remarks
Right.
and then saying that that we made remarks about nurses entertaining pseudoscience.
Yeah.
Wasn't supported
How
at
many
all.
nurses are there in Queensland? It's not going to be a small number. So what proportion is 4,000?
So the Nurses Union is the largest union in Australia, and I think they have close to 50,000 members.
Oh, so it's 8%.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
It's a fair number, isn't it? More than you would have thought. If you'd sat down at the beginning of the pandemic and said, this is what's going to happen with nurses and vaccines, you could have got a lot of money betting against that. You could have got good odds betting against it. Anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's interesting. So there was a case
Well, I don't know if it means just to answer Ross's question, I
Mm.
don't know if it means whether they did or didn't get vaccinated. There isn't actually a causal link there, but I'm just saying they resigned from the union. That was,
No. I think the question is at all any vaccines, not just COVID vaccines.
Oh God, I don't have those.
Mm.
I don't have that kind of information. But there is something specifically.
And I'm seeing a lot of, I'm pro-vaccine, just not this one. But when you listen to anti-vaxxers, that's what anti-vaxxers say. Oh, no,
Yes.
I'm pro-safe vaccines. I'm pro-vaccines in a spaced out, whatever it is. There's always an excuse. They're pro-vaccine, but just not this one, or not in this dose, or not in, and so they're never anti-vax.
Okay.
Nobody
they've just
ever
done their
admits to be.
They've done their research on
Yes.
this particular one. Yes.
And so they're going, well, we're not anti-vax. And you're going, you're using exactly the same tropes as the anti-vaxxers use.
Well, in New South Wales, a judge has dismissed 2 legal challenges to health orders requiring COVID-19 vaccinations for workers in New South Wales.
Did you read the ruling?
No, I've read.
He's quite scathing.
Oh, I've got some of his quotes here. We'll see what he says.
Right.
So the cases were heard in New South Wales Supreme Court, involved 10 plaintiffs, including workers in health, aged care, construction and education. All of them said their employment had been impacted by orders requiring vaccination to continue working. Each unvaccinated worker cited similar concerns about insufficient long-term data on COVID-19 vaccine safety and the side effects. And they used various arguments to attack the validity of the health orders, but they contained some common threads. They contended that the orders violated rights to personal integrity and privacy, implemented civil conscription, represented a breach of natural justice, and were made without clear legislative authority. And Justice Robert Beach-Jones on Friday ruled that all those grounds had failed, and he said, any consideration about the reasonableness of orders should be undertaken by reference to the objects of the Public Health Act, which were directed exclusively at public safety. The judge found that if an order was made interfering with freedom of movement and differentiating on arbitrary grounds unrelated to public health, such as race or gender, then it would be invalid. However, the differential treatment of people according to their vaccination status is not arbitrary. Instead, it applies a discriminant, namely vaccination status, that on the evidence and the approach taken by the minister is very much consistent with the objects of the Public Health Act.
One of his rulings was that there were reasonable curtailments in freedom given the pandemic, and that there was an exemption granted to those people who were vaccinated. And therefore, it wasn't forcing you to be vaccinated. It was saying you could escape from the reasonable conscriptions on your movement
Yes.
if you were vaccinated.
Yes. Yep.
And so that wasn't
Yes.
coercing people.
So a general restriction is applied, which you can release yourself from,
Yes.
rather than a specific restriction is imposed on you.
Correct. You
In
are not being
particular.
punished.
Mm.
It's
You've
a
just
blanket
chosen
ban on
not
movement,
to. Yeah, you've chosen not to avail yourself of the escape clause.
basically.
Yes, that's a good way of putting it.
Mm.
So he was saying these are the very types of restrictions that the Public Health Act clearly authorises. So there we go. In New South Wales, at least.
Interestingly enough, I'm talking to my friends in the UK, and they were saying that they think the challenges in the UK are going to succeed
Right.
because the health acts are not written in the same way as they are over here,
Mm.
where they effectively say the health minister can bring out what do they call it?
State of emergency type of order?
Well, no.
or,
Public health order.
Yep.
And they're saying basically the public health order is lawful because of this law that says,
Yep.
kind of like speed limits.
Mm.
If you look at the law, it doesn't say this stretch of road is this speed. It says Ministry of Transport has the right to set the speed limit on all roads,
Mhm.
and that bears the force of the law.
Mm.
And this is much the same. Whereas in the UK, I think there isn't any such legislation. And so when they've said, you must do this, there's no legal status behind that.
Mm. Mm. There we go. All right, we'll see what happens. Bronwyn says there's a class action underway in Victoria. The group includes teachers, nurses, a surgeon, and even someone who works at CSL, manufacturing AstraZeneca vaccine. Of course.
And they're a whistleblower who's going to spill the dirty secrets.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So what's the latest? Okay, if you are okay, clearly in terms of the community, having people vaccinated, I think the main argument in favour of it is that it clearly has a big effect on the severity of the illness in keeping people out of our hospitals and out of intensive care, and therefore keeping the hospitals' beds available and not crunched by crazy demand. Like that's the number one reason, it seems to me, requiring vaccinations. People who are vaccinated, though, can contract the disease and the virus.
Yeah, very much.
But does vaccination slightly reduce their chances of contracting the virus? I'm not sure.
Effectively, yes. So it reduces your risk of contracting the virus. It makes it less of an impact when you do. It means you clear it from your system more quickly. So you're infectious for less amount of time.
So you can infect, so you could be vaccinated, double vaccinated. You could contract COVID-19. You could pass it on to somebody else. But the whole point is that the possibility of that is reduced than if you were unvaccinated.
Yeah.
So anyway, you'll see people arguing on social media and stuff. Well, people who are vaccinated still get COVID. Well, yeah, they do. I'm not saying they don't. And people who get vaccinated can still pass on COVID. Well, yes. I haven't said they don't. But it's about, is it less a risk than if they were unvaccinated? But more importantly, if we're all vaccinated, then the health system's not going to get crunched. That's the big one.
What's the drink driving limit?
Well, for an open license, 0.05.
All right. So if I get in a car and drive at 0.05, I could have an accident. If I get in a car and drive at 0.5, I could also have an accident.
Yes.
So drinking less has no impact whatsoever.
Yes.
Yeah, it's say it's a tenth of the rate. It has an impact. It's not going to completely stop it from happening, but there is a huge difference between unvaccinated and vaccinated. And that's what people, it's not an on or an off, it's a reduction in risk.
Yes.
And wearing a mask is the same. It reduces the risk. It doesn't completely save you.
Yes.
Being vaccinated and wearing a mask.
Yep. It's just a really shallow argument to just say, oh, vaccinated people still get it and they can still pass it on. Therefore, we shouldn't be insisting people are vaccinated. Well, take into account all these other bits of information.
If people have time, UQ are running a massively open online course on edX called AVAX 101. And it's all about how do we know vaccines work, bit of the history, how do they work, and also why are people vaccine hesitant, and how do you counter their fears? And they did one on climate change denial, which was very, very good. And I've just started the AVAX 101.
So is it like online lectures, is it?
It's online lectures. It's...
How many hours is that?
It's like 2 hours a week for a period of about 8 to 10 weeks.
Right. That's the commitment.
Yeah. But it's free.
And anytime you want? Or you have to...
At the moment, it's sign up, and they're saying that the free access, you only get it for a certain period of time.
Okay. So I'm just thinking uni's over next week.
Yeah, and I don't know how many of the lessons are up, but it's worth looking at. The climate change one was up for a while. One was very, very good. And the videos are now up on YouTube. And it's possible these ones will end up on YouTube.
All right. Very good.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you want more, UQ website.
No, it's edX, edx.org, I think.
Okay.
And just look for AVAX, and it's run by UQ.
Okay. All right. One of the arguments as well has been, just with lockdowns is you've got to take into account the mental anguish and the other deaths that are being caused to people because of lockdowns. So we're getting people with mental health issues as a result of financial strain and other, not seeing their family. And so the anti-lockdown movement would say you need to look at those flow-on effects of lockdown as part of your calculation as to whether lockdowns are worthwhile. And that's a fair enough argument.
Sure.
You should look at those. And if it was a really chronic sort of people in our areas suffering enormous mental health problems at a chronic level, you would say, yeah, maybe we shouldn't be locking down because of this. So anyway, there's an article by Alan Austin from Independent Australia blog, and he says here, data released last week by the Australian Bureau of Statistics confirms that mental health actually improved dramatically in Victoria. So this article was a lot about how Victoria compared to the other states. And of course, Victoria had much longer and harder lockdown than anybody else. So if there was to be mental health issues and suicide issues as a result of a lockdown, you would expect to see it more in Victoria than in other states. So total deaths in Victoria from all causes last year was 41,093. That's actually 2,851 below the previous year. So in Victoria, deaths from all causes were down. And in fact, in Australia, nationwide, deaths nationwide declined 4.7%. So overall deaths down in Victoria and Australia. Suicide statistics. So suicides in Victoria actually fell from 717 in 2019 to 694 in 2020. So suicides in Victoria are actually lower during the lockdown year of 2020 than they were during the non-lockdown of 2019. There's a decline of 3%. And Relative to the population, the 2020 rate was the second lowest in the last 7 years. So extremely low suicide rate in Victoria, second lowest in their last 7 years. And
It's interesting looking at the coalition versus the Labor.
right, suicides,
Suicide seemed to be higher under Labor.
yes.
Don't know if there's a causation to that correlation.
They just give in. like I'm tempted to. No, I don't. Yeah, you're right. You could find this is when you look at stats. You could do a chart and say, well, having the coalition government's better for your suicide rate.
Well,
Yeah.
maybe.
So yes, more people in Australia sought suicide prevention help in 2020 than in previous years. But the author of this says, well, you could say that there were extensive campaigns promoting the services. So just because more people sought it doesn't necessarily mean more people were feeling it. If you've done a big campaign, hey, are you worried about mental health in lockdown? Go and use this service.
They even made it accessible to poor people.
The poor people, the underclass.
That's right.
Yes.
Or more accessible. You only pay $70 or something. You were subsidised a bit for it to see a psychologist. So suddenly you're thinking, oh, well, I probably wouldn't pay $150, but I'd say pay $70. Yeah.
Okay. So virtually all indicators of morbid anxiety and depression improved during 2020. Heart attacks fell by 9% nationwide. Victoria's was 14.3% reduction. So this is one of the other things is people saying you can't get to hospital. So you're going to be dying of other things because the hospitals won't let you in. So heart attacks and other things will increase because people aren't getting the treatment they should be getting because the hospitals are closed because COVID. So in Victoria, there was a 14.3% reduction in heart attack deaths, which was leading the country.
The question is whether people are not getting preventative treatment, which will lead to long-term impacts.
That's right.
And that we won't see in the statistics.
Correct. We won't have statistics for that for several years. Fatalities attributable to mental and behavioural disorders were down 9.9% in Victoria. Cancer deaths.
The all causes mortality, though, has been touted by the anti-vaxxers as reasons why COVID doesn't exist.
Yes.
Because we've got very, very low rates. Yeah, we've had all this COVID around and we've got these really low rates of death. You know, they're lower than they've ever been.
That's right.
But we haven't had COVID.
Yeah.
And we've been locked down, so we haven't had road accidents because we've not been driving around.
Yeah, I know. Anyway, cancer deaths fell by 2.4%. Lung cancers, fatalities by 4.6%.
See, that makes no sense.
Probably attributable to restricted access to smoking outdoors. Hard to say.
No.
In such a short time.
Exactly.
Maybe people are just happy at home with people and they say, look, I'm enjoying my life now. I'm going to hang on. So maybe people are happier.
Well, there's a lot of discussion about work-life balance.
Yes. Yeah. So,
but they're also saying that the problem with working from home is yes,
good on your
incidents of anti-vax freedom fighting nut jobs increased.
Yes. Increased. Even one of the kids I went to high school with, I was on my way to uni last week, and he was just getting out of the car and didn't have a mask on, so I recognised him. I said, "G'day, insert name here," and I said, "Oh, what are you doing?" And he's like, "Oh, just come down from Sunshine Coast to sell some silver, going off grid. I'm not going to be vaccinated." I'm not like, really,
right.
Really.
Sorry, sell some silver.
Sell silver. He's not even using normal currency anymore.
Right.
So sell silver so he can't be tracked. Just because he's not going to participate in the Marxist, what do you say? Marxist regime around communism and
okay.
So I thought the incidence of anti-vax freedom fighting has increased definitely.
Okay. Meanwhile, New South Wales had higher rates than Victoria in fatalities caused by mental and behavioural disorders, heart attacks, arterial disease, gastric and duodenal ulcers, and a whole bunch of other things. So New South Wales did worse than Victoria. So, so there we go. In terms of the evidence so far, you'd have to say that lockdowns have not been detrimental to the mental health or mortality rates in Victoria.
Mhm.
Mind you, if people haven't been going to get tested or treated, that's a statistic that could show up in a few years' time.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I certainly noticed working from home that I'd become a lot more sedentary.
Right. Yes.
Because, the walk from the station to the office, the walk from the office back to the station, going out at lunchtime to get food,
Mm.
whereas everything is now, 10-meter walk to the kitchen.
Yep.
Yes. Yep. Or if you have an esky beside you with the
Well,
big,
exactly.
you can just reach across and get it without even getting up. Speaking of which,
Yes.
just put your hand in that esky there, Joe. Jack H says, history of depression. Found my mental health improve. Easy to suffer alone with depression. Had something in common as we all suffered through last year together. I did remember seeing something like that, Jack H, where people in that situation felt you're not the only person to express it that way. So, I haven't had to commute to work in a long, long time, but I reckon if I was suddenly introduced to not commuting, I'd be very happy compared to my previous existence. Like, commuting sucks. So
Yeah.
all these people have been able to avoid a commute and have that extra time.
All those rich people.
So, well, yes, maybe. Yes. Let's face it, it is the very working poor who are the cleaners,
That's right.
the hospitality workers.
That's right. At first we were essential.
Nursing homes. Yep. All that sort of work, which are actually essential and we need them to do it, still have to physically turn up.
Mm-hmm.
The rest of us who are doing white collar work, who can, to a large extent, do it on the phone or on a computer, have been the ones who have taken advantage of it. Yep. So, true.
But the dole bludgers still work from home.
Right.
Or dole bludge from home.
Here's an interesting one. I think we've previously talked about this sort of concept with transplants, organ transplants, and whether you should lose eligibility for transplants in certain situations. And we were talking about people who were vaccinated. Well, okay, we've got no beds in ICU or we've got limited number. Oh, you didn't get vaccinated. Well, we're not going to waste a bed on you because we've got other people who have been vaccinated, and in fact, they've got a better chance of living now than you do. So you miss out on that bed, and where there's limited resources. We're talking about that could be a problem for the unvaccinated in that they, even a triage situation, they could legitimately miss out on a treatment where resources are slim. So in Colorado, a health system told a prospective kidney transplant recipient that she would not receive an organ donation if she remained unvaccinated against the coronavirus. So the patient had about 12% of her kidney function left, and they'd found a donor. And UC Health told the TV station that studies had shown that transplant recipients who later tested positive for COVID had a significantly higher mortality rate, 18 to 32%, compared to 1.6% among those in the general population who tested positive. So, if you've got a kidney transplant and you test positive, you've got a higher chance of dying than people who don't have a transplant. So they've got a policy, and they said that transplant patients were generally required to meet similar requirements before and after surgery, even before the pandemic. Patients may be required to receive vaccinations including hepatitis B, MMR, and others. The spokesman told the paper in an email, patients may also be required to avoid alcohol, stop smoking, or prove they will be able to continue taking their anti-rejection medications long after their transplant surgery. The patient, Leilani Lutali, told the TV station that she had learned of the hospital's policy as her donor was undergoing the required testing. She said that she worried about how the vaccines might affect her health in the future and that she and her donor had declined them for religious reasons. I'm being coerced into making a decision that is one I'm not comfortable making right now in order to live, Ms. Vitali said.
Well, Jesus sent her a liver and set the boundaries required.
Yes. Kidney.
God helps those who help themselves.
Yeah. Who knows how much medication she's had to take and whatnot she's been on with the 12% functioning kidney.
right.
And now she says, actually, not so sure about this COVID vaccine.
And so the immunosuppressants actually stop your ability to react to vaccines as well as to diseases.
Right.
And so they really want you to get vaccinated before you start the medication. So you build up the antibodies that are sitting there in your bloodstream to give you protection afterwards, because the chance of you mounting a response afterwards is very low. And so this really is preventative medicine.
Yes. Yep. And you can imagine all the time they'd be saying to people, stop smoking, stop drinking alcohol. We're going to give you this other Hep B vaccine, whatever, a whole bunch of things where you just got to go, yep, give it to me, whatever I've got to do. And saying,
And
no.
my cousin has a very rare sort of, I don't even know the name of it, and his kidneys are failing. And his dad said, I'll give you one of mine.
Yes.
And we don't have an outcome yet, but it's going to look like they're taking it all in. His health, his likeliness to live after the surgery. It's a major surgery. There's a whole range of considerations, And, if you're going to have a kidney transplant, then you've got to trust your doctor. They're going to cut you up. Cut you up, put somebody else's kidney in, but you won't trust them to say, here's what you need to do first. Weird. Weird.
I'm seeing a lot of fatigue in medical professionals who are going, we're putting our lives on the line. You're coming to us when you're sick. You want the help, but we're offering you something that's going to keep you out of the hospital, and you're turning it down because you don't believe in that, but you believe in it when you turn up and you want a ventilator and you want us to treat you. And to be fair, I empathize with them saying, I've had enough. You're not looking after yourselves and you're putting our lives at risk. And if you can't be bothered to do that, then I've had enough. I'm not going to do it. And we're either going to see them quit or we're going to see them going more and more refuse to treat the unvaccinated.
Look, I can see there'd be fatigue in the medical community. I see fatigue in the podcast community, just arguing the points all the time. Just a little bit on Taiwan before we finish up. Did you hear about the Chinese invading Taiwanese airspace and sort of running sort of aircraft into their space? And it was a threatening action by the Chinese, saber rattling, sending signals to the west and all the rest of it. And
yes,
one of the things you've got to recognize in this is that they have these zones, which is called ADIS, Air Defense Intelligence Zone, ADIZ, I think it is.
Yeah.
So essentially, let me just find this. Airspace is a concept in international law referring to a line 12 nautical miles beyond a nation's border. So that's airspace, 12 nautical miles. ADIZ is an area much further out from the borders within which a nation declares it has the authority to identify, track and control foreign aircraft approaching its territory. So roughly 20 nations have established an ADIZ and they define its scope differently. So the US zone extends 200 miles beyond its borders. So the US says, if you're going to fly in this zone within 200 miles of our border, we demand the right to track, identify, and control what you're doing, even though it's not above our land space. So Taiwan's ADIZ covers all of the Taiwan Strait, part of the East China Sea, in a section of mainland China's Fujian and Xinjiang provinces. So there's a map that will go up on the screen, and so there's Taiwan, the island there, and there's China, and that sort of funny rectangular type thing is what they claim as their airspace. Well, the ADIZ zone that they claim they need to be told if an aircraft. So an aircraft could be flying over mainland China, and the Taiwanese would say it's an invasion of their ADIZ. So there's a reference here to a tweet which was from the Taiwanese, I don't know, aircraft ministry or whatever they're called, showing where the planes came into their zone, and it was just the most minor incursion. They were much closer to China than they were to Taiwan. So when you hear about the Chinese saber rattling and flying into Taiwanese airspace, in quotes, it's hard to tell exactly where they were and what they were doing and whether they might have been actually closer to China than they were to Taiwan.
By the looks of it, and I'm guessing the red arrow is their flight path.
Yes.
They flew in at a direct vector to hit the southern tip of Taiwan. And at the speeds these aircraft are traveling at, you don't have much time to respond. Which is why they want the alert. And so a plane traveling northeast up the coast of China, so what, don't care. If it's coming through China heading towards Taiwan, they want to know.
Yeah, but when you hear a report that says the Chinese had aircraft invading the Taiwanese ADIZ, it's quite possible they were actually within the boundaries of China at the time, because the Taiwanese ADIZ is such a broad area.
Yeah, but looking at that, they were flying deliberately at Taiwan and then turned around, and that is a provocative act.
Well, true. But there's a lot of provocation going on. But
it's
all about putting it into perspective. Yeah. So no doubt the Chinese were doing a little bit of, they would have known exactly where the so-called border was, and they're just saying,
the Russians were flying at Scotland a couple of years back.
Right.
And they were doing it deliberately.
Right.
And when you want to find out the strength of your opponent's defense force, you do a lot of that flying up to the line to see how people respond and what comes up. And
the Chinese were probably doing the Taiwanese a favour, just testing them out a little bit. Yeah. Helping them out with a little friendly exercise. Yeah.
Can you explain why we care?
We care because the Americans are having finished one war in Afghanistan. Got a lot of spare capacity, and there's the industrial military complex wants budgets for spending more money on military equipment that they'll supply, and so a new Cold War with China is exactly what they want, because they can sell more stuff. So it's all about beating up the security risks because they can sell more stuff, essentially. Yeah. And you look.
So there's no actual threat to us.
Well, and we'll get dragged into that.
Yes.
Because we're the lapdog. And look, the China could actually consider, it would be considering taking back Taiwan. But in terms of a military response, if they do that, we'd be crazy. They've done all the war gaming. The Americans have done the war gaming and said, what do we do if China really does make a solid attempt to take Taiwan? Can we stop them? And the answer was no. Like, they can't do it. So really what they've got to do is use other methods like, okay, we'll get together with the rest of the world. We won't buy their shit and we won't sell them stuff, and, you know, all that sort of economic sort of tactics is what you would do in the event that China decided to take Taiwan. So
You can also make it very, very costly.
Yeah, in terms of for the Chinese,
For the
in terms of-
Chinese.
in lives, like
Yes.
yes. So yes,
And therefore the question is,
Mm,
is it a Pyrrhic victory
right.
where, yes, you won, but at what
Cost
cost?
a lot. Yeah. So, but then it could cost a lot of American lives as well. So, yeah, that's basically just bear in mind if you hear about aircraft incursions into areas, it may not be what it seems at first blush. Right. I think we've reached the hour and a half mark. We've kept Shay out of the Shark Tank, and now I am like I've made my notes for my next little. Okay, so I had a book which was what was it called? In the ruins of where is it? Hang on a second.
You got some hold music, Joe?
Not to hand. Trevor's the man with the
That's true.
So I know I promised a book review last week. And here's the problem. I was reading this book, which was Less is More, so by Jason Hickel. So he was really making the argument that even if we get to net zero by 2050, the way the world works with capitalism is it needs 3% growth per annum in order to function. And 3% growth means you're essentially doubling GDP every 23 years. And if you keep doubling and every 23 years and doubling, you might have met net zero on carbon emissions, but it's going to get increasingly harder to keep it there. And there's a whole bunch of other things in terms of things to do with overfishing, soil degradation, species extinction, just deforestation that will just keep going because of extraction is growth, essentially. So he was really saying that ultimately in the long term, there's no such thing as green growth. You have to start taking growth out of the system because this sort of capitalism's imperative of growth means that as far as the planet's concerned, we're just going to keep extracting things in order to meet the demands of capitalism. So anyway, problem was this book sent me down a whole bunch of other rabbit holes along the way. So gave a really interesting expose of what happened. Because when you say, well, if I was to say to you, we've got to stop with capitalism, for example, people would go, but hang on a minute, capitalism is what got us out of the dark ages, the sort of medieval type of system we were under, and it gave us all this great stuff. And so it put me onto this book, which was basically describing life in the Middle Ages and the use of the commons and essentially the lifestyle of people. And I found it quite interesting. So I went down that whole rabbit hole. And then there was another rabbit hole, which was basically looking at when neoliberalism came in with Hayek and Milton Friedman, Margaret Thatcher, and Ronald Reagan. The whole point of neoliberalism was not just economics, which was get rid of government regulations, allow globalization, and I think what the third one was. But a lot of there's actually an anti-society component in neoliberalism, which was, not only is government bad, but the notion of society and the notion that society could compel individuals to do things against their will is just outrageous. And so it was
very
more than
Ayn Rand.
Yes. And so that's really part of where there's this whole tension all the time between individual freedom versus the ability of the collective and the commons to impose conditions on people, which we're seeing all the time in this goddamn vaccination argument. And so he actually examines Friedman and Hayek and how they were very much, there was not just economics involved, but there was this sort of sociological conditioning and indoctrination that the commons and society were bad and that personal freedom was, in terms of hierarchy, far more important. And in actual fact, these people who are so pro individual rights actually are not that democratic quite often. They would be happy with a totalitarian state that allowed personal freedoms. They wouldn't care if it was undemocratic, because personal freedom is the most important thing. And in fact, a democracy that might then impose conditions on people and restrict their freedom is just evil. So to a lot of people, the notion, for libertarians and their almost religious sort of zeal for personal freedom, democracy is a danger. And the thought of the majority imposing a condition on an individual is abhorrent to them. They'd rather a totalitarian dictator who just allowed free will and markets to apply, and if he didn't get to vote him in or out, well, that's okay. So
the Thatcher quote here. I think we've been through a period where too many people have been given to understand that if they have a problem, it's the government's job to cope with it. I have a problem, I'll get a grant. I'm homeless, the government must house me. They're casting their problems on society, and that there is no such thing as society. There are individual men and women, and there are families, and no government can do anything except through people, and people must look to themselves first. It's our duty to look after ourselves, and then also to look after our neighbour. People have got the entitlements too much in mind without the obligations. There's no such thing as entitlement unless somebody has first met an obligation.
So that argument has won through. And we've got Barnaby Joyce now, like he's goddamn.
But one would argue that the obligation is, certainly in terms of the vaccination, the whole freedom, is your obligation is to make sure that you protect the other members of the weaker members of society. And the obligation, conversely with the libertarians, is to pay your way in taxes. Looking after your neighbour is paying your taxes and paying for those who are less fortunate.
So anyway, I decided on my book as a result of all this. Yes. So it's really on this concept of, the honeybee or the fruit fly. So human beings are honeybees. We're not fruit flies. And essentially, the parts of it would be that the first part would be that we as humans have some hardwiring, which has come about through evolution. So my favorite topics of the whispering beta males and humans are a domesticated animal and psychopathic chicken story and all that sort of stuff is sort of hardwiring that we as humans have. And then if you think of it as a computer, and then the software that we have, our operating system, is our sort of philosophies and moral systems. So starting off with Homer and the ancient Greeks, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, and basically explaining how we've got that tension between personal liberty versus the community, the collective. That's at different times in our history, we've had different software, and that is a thing that we can change by decision if we want to. And then just looking at, what has actually happened in terms of history, and basically then looking at the Industrial Revolution and neoliberalism and how that basically wrought the rise of this individual freedom has sort of won out, and that we need to return to an appreciation of the commons. And
did individual freedom also come about from the Enlightenment?
Yes, it absolutely did. So, so all that's really interesting to figure out who was responsible and how we got there, and still lay on top of that things like free will. I mean, the evidence seems to be that we don't actually have free will.
There's arguments in either direction.
Yes. But if you are, a super rational person who demands the freedom of the individual in all respects as a first priority, and that you're incredibly rational about this and scientific, well, you have to deal with the free will argument, because if there is no free will, then that personal freedom and liberty that you're talking about so much is actually a bit of a figment of your imagination, perhaps.
Yes.
Quite tricky, that thing. So, anyway, because and having thought about this, I sort of see it everywhere in these arguments now. Like, the whole vaccination thing is all about that tension between personal liberty and the right of the collective to impose conditions on using the commons. Essentially,
Yes.
if there was a libertarian island that these people want to just fuck off to and go to, well, good, go. But no, you
Yes.
actually want to hang around and use the commons, well, we get to regulate it.
Yes.
And you might think it's authoritarian, but it's actually democracy, and it's actually how we've been operating in our communities. And arseholes like Barnaby Joyce are in Parliament saying, I'm sick of the state and its interference, and this whole, if you look at what's happened today and yesterday in terms of
The theatre.
the argument for 2050 and net zero, Morrison is basically saying, we're going to do it the Australian way. We're going to do it through innovation. We're not going to impose conditions on people. We're going to allow people to do their own choices on this. We don't believe as on our side of politics that we can impose conditions on people.
So if they don't want to impose conditions, can I go in and break into his house and take all his goods?
Yeah, well, this is the point. All the time conditions are imposed.
Yeah.
Yes. So, yeah. So anyway, I'm going to work on that. I think I need to do that. So
that'll be next week, will it?
Well, that'll be the start of it next week.
Okay.
Yes, there we go.
So it's guaranteed to be less depressing by the sounds of it.
Yeah,
That's
a bit more meta, because we just get into the weeds on these most depressing things and we go, oh, God.
Just as a complete sidetrack, have you heard of the Kardashev Scale?
The Kardashev Scale.
Kardashev.
No.
He was a Russian something or other. I forget what now. It's about the amount of energy a civilization uses.
Right.
And so a type 1 civilization uses all the energy that falls onto it from its star.
Right.
And then you go type 2 and type 3. And they're saying effectively these are more advanced civilizations that are able to capture and use large amounts of energy.
Right.
Without resorting to fossil fuels effectively.
What's an example of that?
So they're saying that future civilizations will have huge amounts of energy that is almost limitless.
Yes.
And so you were saying we're profligate in our energy use.
Yes.
And they're saying that future technologies will enable us to capture and use large amounts of energy.
Yeah, but what Jason Hickel is saying in Less is More is, okay, you might get energy under control, but if you are extracting all the time from the earth, you're going to run out of stuff to extract.
Right.
And
Okay.
Deforestation, overfishing, soil degradation, that sort of thing. So, we'll have the energy, which might be carbon neutral, but we'll still be having problems as a result. Yeah. Not perhaps we might sort global warming out, but we'll end up with a barren earth in any event.
Yeah, but I mean, if
that sounds more depressing.
we're efficiently capturing all of the energy that's coming from the sun,
Yes,
and using that could possibly fuel a civilization that is much greater than we have now.
as in bigger.
Yeah.
Yep. But what are we going to eat, and what are we going to sit on, and what are we going to wear? And
if we have a larger number of people, there's a limit in terms of the number of people.
Right. Yep.
That is sustainable, unless we escape the planet. which is also a possibility.
So,
because at the moment, again, the problem of escaping the planet is energy.
yes.
And so if we have limitless energy, we can possibly go elsewhere and terraform.
One day, I'm sure we will. Anyway, well, that's enough. We've really dragged on now.
That's all right.
Deep philosophy.
Yes.
Oh,
So, yeah, that's what we'll do next week. Kickstart on that. In the chat room, good on you. If you feel like contributing to I'm going to mention the patrons next week. I better do that. And if you can make it to Noosa this Saturday, get along. That'll be fun. And otherwise, talk to you next week. Bye for now.
Good night.
That's a good night from him.